I am Jeffrey Edward Epstein, and my residence address is at 6100 Red Hook Boulevard in the Virgin Islands.
Some will certainly say that talking about Jeffrey Edward Epstein now, in 2026, is kind of beating a dead horse. After all, it's been years since his perversions were publicly exposed. The guy was tried in 2008, sentenced like a minor offender here in Brazil, you know? He spent a few months in jail. After that, the public got outraged. With good reason, so he was arrested again. He was going to be prosecuted, but he killed himself in prison in 2019. End of this dirty story, right? Far from it, and for several reasons.
Have you ever been convicted of a crime?
Yes,
What was the crime you were convicted of?
2 charges, one for soliciting prostitution and another for enticing a minor into prostitution.
We took a tour through the information, the dark and shocking theories related to him. And look, it's safe to say that after learning every detail of Epstein's story, the world truly becomes a more dangerous and frightening place, okay? And like all the known information, theories, hypotheses, there are so many bizarre things going around that you look at it and your brain automatically says, watch out. This is so absurd it sounds like a conspiracy theory. It's hard to believe such atrocities. I'm saying this because the sexual exploitation activities of teenagers, boys and girls, and also women that he promoted, which went over 250 reports, are just the tip of the iceberg of his crimes, okay? Naturally, he didn't act alone, so many heads should have rolled, but that didn't happen. And even with the recent release to the public of about 3 million documents, including videos, photos, emails, messages, and so on and so on and so on, it doesn't seem like the guilty will pay. And the reason for that is that Epstein's clients have infinite power and money. You know that thing from movies, the invisible hand of the company that we see? You don't know who it is, you just hear about it. Yeah, all of this is far from our justice system, from society, right? Are you guys finding this weird, folks? Look, are we just imagining things? Relax, you'll learn everything then, and it gets worse. And today's video is like this. A general overview with a lot of context, just the way you like it, every little detail, putting together each link in this chain. It's like that. The truth in this whole story is a mix of movies, isn't it? Like, for example, 8mm with Nicolas Cage, Eyes Wide Shut, which, by the way, even cost the director Stanley Kubrick his life. So, stay with me, stay until the end, and then tell me what you think in the comments. Deal? I'm Marcos Campos. Welcome, everyone. And look, I need to give you a quick overview of the main character's biography, okay? So that all the most macabre hypotheses make perfect sense. Understand this complete biography as building it brick by brick. The links that start to close, the reasons why, how can someone have such unrestricted power, apparently at the very top of the pyramid controlling everything, right? Supposedly, let's see. The official version of events mentions that Jeffrey Epstein's parents got married in 1952 and baby Epstein was born in 1953. His parents, Pauline and Seymour, were poor Jews living in the United States, facing the tough reality of the post-World War II era. Pauline took care of the house and the children. Jeffrey and Mark, and her husband Seymour was a janitor and gardener employed by the New York Department of Parks and Recreation. Given that reality, what was the likely future for the Epstein boys? Well, even with the best opportunities in life and luck smiling on them, in Jeffrey's case, apparently the whole universe was aligned and conspiring in his favor. Okay? After studying at local public schools where he had a completely normal trajectory with good performance in music, he got into the Institute of Mathematical Sciences at New York University in 1971. That was at 18 years old. 3 years later, in 74, he left college, but without graduating. Only 2 months after dropping out of college, Epstein started working as a physics and math teacher for teenagers at Dalton School in Manhattan. A position, let's say, way above his qualifications, right? And his obvious lack of experience. The future would later suggest that he got this job because of his intelligence quotient, or rather, because of a recommendation from someone with influence inside the educational institution. At Dalton School, he stayed for 2 years with completely inappropriate behavior. socializing with his underage students at parties with alcohol, and also flirting with the teenage girls. Just imagine. However, at that school, the students were children of wealthy families, people with money and social prestige. And by all indications, Professor Epstein, even with character flaws and not being that great at math and physics, was an excellent self-promoter, especially at parent-teacher meetings. So he started making friends there at the school, you know? Well, in short, he formed close ties with Alan Greenberg, the chief executive officer of Barry Stern's company. This man, guys, was the father of a pair of teenagers who studied there who were Epstein's students. So, when in 1976 he was fired from that job, Mr. Greenberg offered the teacher a job at Bear Stearns, which is described as a financial company operating on the stock exchange. Anyway, an enviable professional opportunity. And look, guys, a quick pause here for us to reflect, okay? Things that seem to only happen in television shows like Blacklist, you know? Think about it. Either the guy was born super lucky, like his luck was aimed right at a perfect little crater on the moon, or there was something else going on there. It can't be possible. And we're going to explore those theories in a bit, okay? Mr. Epstein's rise was meteoric, going from a bank employee to a banker in just 5 years. That's right, guys. It's reported that he was hired as an assistant to a floor trader, but he was quickly transferred to the special products division, which meant access to the accounts of mega clients, those who were truly millionaires. Praised for his ability to navigate in that environment and generate profits for Bear Stearns, he became a shareholder and almost a partner. Until, in 1981, he was asked to leave for violating internal regulations, but he left on top despite that. At that point, Epstein created his own financial firm and still maintained friendly personal relationships with his former bosses and did a lot of business together with them for almost 30 years until his empire began to crumble with the recent allegations of sexual crimes. That brings to mind the saying that business is business, right? The guy was there, he had to follow the company's guidelines. You're going to have to leave, but we'll talk outside. And look, that's why people call him an American financier, right? He was, let's say, a big fish, guys, a whale in the investment world. But it also seems that in the 80s, things started to get more out in the open, let's say, when Epstein founded his own financial consulting company, Intercontinental Assets Group, Inc. Its mission was to recover for its clients money that was supposedly stolen or diverted from their accounts by fraudulent brokers and lawyers. Well, let me make an observation here, okay? You know how sometimes we read the statement, it was never luck, it was always God? Well, in Epstein's case, it definitely wasn't luck, but it wasn't God either, right? Unless he was calling something else God, you know, something that was already manifesting. But there was someone behind the scenes giving him power, okay? But you know what kind of behind the scenes I mean, right? Like that Blacklist episode with the Kingmaker. Do you know why I say this? Because it's on the web, guys, for everyone to see, research, and realize that Epstein himself described his work as that of a high-level bounty hunter. At that time, he was already proud to say that he provided consulting services for governments and wealthy people working on recovering embezzled funds. Hunter of relics, embezzled funds. At the same time, he also served other clients, right, who embezzled money, maybe to send it to those so-called tax havens, right, or even for money laundering. One of his satisfied clients was the Spaniard Ana Obregón, who had lost millions of dollars from her father's investments. When a certain financial institution went bankrupt, where the investments were held, it seems that, at that point, Epstein's relationships shifted from powerful businessmen and wealthy people to powerful politicians. For example, I can say that he advised the Saudi businessman Adnan Khashoggi, who was an intermediary in the transfer of American weapons from Israel to Iran. The 1980s, guys, were marked by countless international trips and contacts with warlords from every continent. Besides the word-of-mouth promotion from his satisfied clients, let's say, which made him a sought-after professional, Epstein seemed to have a second career. He told some people that he was a CIA intelligence agent, so much so that he had restricted weapons. And at the very least, he also had an unofficial Austrian passport with his photo, a fake name, of course, and an address in Saudi Arabia. What was true about this story of him being a secret agent or a spy? Well, the rumor is that in 2008, the United States Attorney, specifically for Southern Florida, Alexander Acosta, was told that he should leave Epstein alone regarding the possible allegations of sex with minors. Because Epstein belonged to intelligence and was at a much higher level of salary and immunity than the prosecutor himself. And among his new contacts was Stephen Hoffenberg. The two men traveled around the world, guys. Keep watching, okay? Pay attention to how these connections are forming. They traveled around the world with the goal of finding profitable opportunities in the financial world. Their specialty in the early 90s was to find companies in bankruptcy and buy those companies' debts, thus promoting the recovery of their financial health. In other words, Hoffenberg's company injected a lot of money into the business, prevented bankruptcy, and attracted new investors to maintain the profitability of these so-called saved companies. However, time showed that their real specialty was running a scheme called Ponzi. For us here, it's known as a pyramid scheme. In other words, a fraudulent investment operation that involves the promise of usually high returns to investors. But there's a problem with that. There's no money or profit generated by any real company. It's the money from the investors themselves, the new investors, that pays the older investors. Get it? It's like this. One day it's going to go bad, the whole thing will collapse, and someone will end up with nothing. In 1993, Towers Financial Corporation, the company run by the scoundrels Hoffenberg and Epstein, came to an end when it was discovered that in reality it was a front for one of the biggest Ponzi schemes in United States history. The losses for their investors were around $450 million at the time. Guys, that's almost $1 billion if we adjust for today, okay? Epstein, like a clever rat, jumped ship before it sank and was never held criminally responsible for his involvement in this scam. In this financial field, he continued incredibly to do well, for example, gradually becoming the right-hand man of billionaire Leslie Wexner, president and chief executive officer of L Brands and the Victoria's Secret brand. The trust was so great, just so you know, that Epstein had a power of attorney with unrestricted, unlimited powers. In other words, he could hire people, buy, sell, own, do whatever he wanted, make loans, do any activity, guys, of a legal nature in Wexner's name. Was this normal? Common? We don't think so, right? At least not for a consultant, because in this case, guys, Epstein wasn't a partner or an heir. You know how it works, right? But with Victoria's Secret, he moved up a new level in life, okay? And Victoria's Secret, for those who don't know, is like this. In honor of Queen Victoria. It's one of the most profitable brands in the world, right? A business of lingerie, cosmetics, and so on. Making billions of dollars, it runs advertising campaigns with the most expensive models in the world. And he, an ordinary guy, the son of a very humble family, was there in his 40s at that time and became an influential and powerful man in this whole world of luxury and also of lust, right? Of luxury, beauty, and ostentation. In 1996, Epstein changed the name of his company to Financial Trust Company and moved its headquarters to the island of St. Thomas in the United States Virgin Islands, where the income tax is about 10% of what is charged on the American mainland. An absurd tax advantage which made money come in for him like this, wow man, in huge amounts, all within the law. And at that time, a huge list of his other businesses appeared. Okay? Investments in magazines and celebrities, like our Kara's magazine from back then, partnerships with media and film executives. More recent news from 2015 published by the Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports that Epstein was an investor in a startup called Report Homeland Security Carbine. This startup was connected to Israel's defense industry. Check this out. Regarding this topic, the current accusations are that the businessman or maybe CIA agent, sold military secrets to Israel for the development of atomic weapons, guys, or nuclear weapons. Things that are different but have the same goal, right? To create fear. Those who have them are afraid, right? Afraid of mass destruction. And if we take a moment to breathe a little slower right now and analyze this trajectory, we'll notice that Epstein became a millionaire while cultivating friendships with many powerful men in different areas of society. And his world was no longer limited by borders, okay? By borders as well. For any well-intentioned man, that's already dangerous, isn't it? All that unrestricted power. Because of ego, the possibility of breaking the law and all ethical behaviors and still getting away with it. But for a bad-intentioned guy, my friends, that's basically total and unrestricted access to the depths of hell, isn't it? A place where no moral restraint exists. So the time comes, the moment to reveal the other side of Jeffrey Edward Epstein. What exploded in the media, the sexual exploitation of girls and women, from 14-year-old teenagers to older women. Some of them talented professionals who were looking to Epstein for artistic sponsorship or a boost in their careers through his network of contacts in the celebrity world. The point is that he went far beyond all the perverted behaviors that were known and practiced, for example, in Hollywood. In his millionaire mansion spread across several cities, New York, Palm Beach, Florida, New Mexico. Also on his private island, he set up a scheme just like Sodom and Gomorrah, but it worked like a double-edged sword, dangerous on both sides. After becoming the owner of an exorbitant fortune, he bought, besides the mansions in that island, planes, boats, and all the luxury items anyone could wish for. Epstein, for years, together with his girlfriend and partner Ghislaine Maxwell, recruited girls to satisfy the desires of old rich people and others. According to the findings of a recent documentary about the case, it's pretty logical to imagine that these filthy men, these depraved friends of Epstein, had their own ways of getting prostitutes, drugs, and whatever else they wanted, right? Epstein didn't invent this service. It had already existed for decades, which makes me drift off and stay in my thoughts thinking that since he was a really clever guy, in fact, that actually makes sense. Nobody needed him to get into those perversions with girls and all that, whatever it was. But since he was so clever, maybe he invited the guys with good intentions, but when they got there, it was all messed up. Not that they didn't know, but follow my reasoning here. But once they were already there, they were kind of stuck in the guy's mess, you know? I don't know if this was a planned thing from him, like, I'm all messed up here, sooner or later things are going to get bad for me, so I'm going to drag everyone else into the mud with me. Suddenly everyone has secrets. You know how it goes, right? Many powerful things endure because everyone has secrets. That's the truth. I don't know if that's what happened. It just occurred to me. I wanted to share this with you. Comment here what you think. But moving on, like I said, he didn't invent this service. It has existed for a long time. Hollywood, for example, is always mentioned as a den of sexual predators. We know that, right? So, what else did he offer maybe? The absence of any human moral limits at the parties he threw at his houses? There's that detail too, right? Maybe he offered something that the guys couldn't find anywhere else. Anyway, the thing is, there were video cameras in every place, absolutely every place. And so, when Epstein's guests were having fun behind closed doors without knowing it, they were being filmed. And then I go back to my theory that this was right. I'm going to get dirt on these guys. They're going to be tied to me. I'm not going down alone. Well, these recordings made it possible to blackmail and extort people, like I said, so they wouldn't be released and destroy those so-called tycoons, right? Literally caught red-handed in the act. It also worked as an insurance policy for Epstein because if he was ever accused or arrested, he would certainly use this evidence, right? But, as already mentioned, on Epstein's premises, under the coordination of Ghislaine Maxwell, his wife and partner, what was offered was not limited to normal sex with hired men and women. There is talk of abuse of children and teenagers, many of them drugged, but there is also talk of rituals involving torture, death, and cannibalism. And that's exactly why we mentioned it here at the beginning of the episode, right guys? The movie 8mm from 1999 with Nicolas Cage. For those who don't remember this story, the actor plays the role of an investigator hired by a millionaire's widow. After her husband's death, she finds among his belongings an 8mm videotape where the man sexually abuses, tortures, and kills a young woman. The big question this wife needed to know was who her husband really was. A promiscuous scoundrel who cheated on her with actresses and prostitutes, or a sadistic psychopath capable of hiring an experience like that, which involved getting physical pleasure from the suffering and violent death of a girl. Nicolas Cage then investigates the underworld of pornography and so-called snuff movies, where violence, mutilations, and real deaths happen instead of just being staged. And if you research the subject on the web today, you'll find information saying that snuff movies are an urban legend created to get the public to watch certain productions. Who knows, right? Where there's smoke, there's fire. I even remembered in this whole context here, guys, about Squid Game. Because think about it, you have a group of eccentric millionaires taking pleasure in watching people kill each other, right? Dying there. All kinds of psychological layers and the pain and suffering, even the blood, those guys taking pleasure in that, right? Arousal, it's a crazy thing, right, guys? Well, the most recent reports about the hellish paradises that Jeffrey Epstein created involve this shocking topic, right? About events of this nature. His clients, who were some of the richest men and women on the planet, would gather under Epstein's roof to experience things of this extreme and disturbing nature, where babies were allegedly killed in sacrifices to ancient pagan gods, and their entrails were served as food to the guests. So now the other film mentioned comes into play, Eyes Wide Shut from '99, directed by Stanley Kubrick, who supposedly died of a heart attack just 4 or 5 days after finishing the film. That is filming plus editing a film ready to go for distribution. In short, guys, the story revolves around a young couple, okay? Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman, who attend a strange Christmas party where they are guests of a millionaire patient, the main character. By a twist of fate, at the party, they come across sexual orgies, satanic rituals, overdoses, drugs, and other disturbing things that are completely outside their lifestyle. From the moment they know too much, they are coerced into participating in this parallel reality so they won't be killed. Even though it's based on a book, this script seems to anticipate the things that were seen and described at Epstein's parties. As if director Stanley Kubrick had made a disguised denunciation, maybe. After his death, the film underwent several changes, with 23 minutes of footage being removed. This led the story to focus more on the couple's sexual conflicts and less on the seriousness of what happens around them. Man, that's really crazy, isn't it? If it's a conspiracy theory, I don't know. Like I said at the beginning, right? When many things connect, you realize this could be a theory. You know that thing that's so bizarre that you say, there's no way this could be true. Think about that. People also talk, guys, about an alternate ending for this movie, a lighter one, okay? But in the original, as envisioned by Kubrick, the audience would understand that the characters were led to hand over their own little daughter to those damned organizers of the rituals. Just in case, also because of the director's premature and supposedly unexplained death, the work gained greater weight, prophetic or as a denunciation, even after the exposure of Epstein's crimes. And speaking of bizarre works, we absolutely cannot fail to mention that the lives of Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell can be easily recognized in the work-space relations, right? An interplanetary tale, slightly gothic, from 1973, a prophetic novel by Donald Barr, which in short also features characters who live in a society where boredom and absolute power have driven them insane, and where it is also common practice to kidnap humans so they can become illegal sex toys for the super rich of the galaxy. Of course, it could just be a bad story, but it is said that the author-writer Donald Barr, who was also a man from the financial market, was the one who introduced Jeffrey Epstein to the Maxwell family. If I haven't mentioned it yet, guys, it's interesting to know who Ghislaine's father was. Noel Marion Maxwell, okay? His wife, their partner, associate, and everything else. Well then, old Ian Robert Maxwell was baptized with another name when he was born in 1923 in the former Czechoslovakia. After immigrating to the United Kingdom, he became a powerful and wealthy businessman in the British publishing industry and was a member of parliament. He was also a fraudster and an alleged spy for the State of Israel. In this context, it makes sense that he and his daughter Ghislaine were connected both to the writer Donald Barr and later to Epstein. The world of the rich is smaller than ours, guys. As incredible as it may seem, at the wild parties held at Jeffrey's house, practically all the rich people in the world attended. Think of a rich person. Flip a coin. Whichever side it lands on, they were there. For example, Leonardo DiCaprio, famous musicians and businessmen too, like Bill Gates. Presidents from the United States, Donald Trump, Bill Clinton, and also politicians like John Kennedy. I'm just kidding. I just wanted to see if you were paying attention since today's video is pretty heavy. At that time, of course, Kennedy was already dead, but several American presidents and former presidents went to Epstein's house, okay? Among those I've already mentioned, there's also George Bush and another big name who showed up there too, former Prince Andrew Mountbatten Windsor, brother of King Charles III. Here, in the way we see things, guys, the couple Ghislaine and Epstein were constantly casting their nets or their bait. They offered drugs, sex, rock and roll, every kind of thing you can imagine exists in the world. Whoever wanted to fell into their trap. Whoever was foolish or also demonic and wanted to go beyond the perversions they already practiced with their own more discreet and trustworthy suppliers, perhaps. We can mention this because hundreds of people went through those houses and parties. Ronaldo Fenomeno himself, the Brazilian player, was there. He was photographed. Facts speak for themselves. Of course, that gave prestige to the events, didn't it? The celebrities were there, and many attended innocently and just once, like in Ronaldo's case, for example. I'm not stupid, so I'll be careful here, right? There are millions of photos of Epstein next to celebrities like Michael Jackson and so many others. People who, because of their own personal and professional paths, also gave credibility and influence to Epstein. Suddenly, the guy was a madman without limits who also wanted this kind of thing besides the perversions, who knows. But do you want to see the most extreme demonstration of this practice? Even the British scientist Stephen Hawking was on Epstein's island. It is said that a submarine was built and adapted for Hawking's wheelchair access. So the scientists took a submarine ride around Epstein's private island in the company of him and Ghislaine. So guys, Stephen Hawking was a theoretical physicist, doctor in cosmology, writer, and British professor recognized for his contribution to science and one of the most renowned scientists of the 20th and 21st centuries. But he was there, in the picture, next to that pig Epstein. And speaking of science, sources say that Epstein invested millions in genetic research, okay? And the theories range from improving the human race, eugenics, to the creation of hybrids and super soldiers. And then you're free to choose your own theories. But the embryology labs were funded by him. And that's, okay, there are doctors' names, research titles, addresses, everything is documented. It's even said that he wanted to perpetuate his own existence in genetically modified children. Things like that, things we usually see in movies, suddenly like a psychopathic scientist without ethics and with a lot of money, right? Overflowing with pleasure, if you know what I mean. Of course, all of this and the details of the abuses committed against girls and women have already been explored since 2008. The new issues related to Jeffrey Epstein exploded on January 30th, now in 2026 as well. New issues. When the United States Department of Justice stepped in and released the largest batch of files in the history of the case. That's 3 million pages, 2,000 videos, 180,000 images. This caused chaos in the inhabited world because the apparent rush to comply with the transparency law resulted in even amateur mistakes. Victims' lawyers reported that the government failed to hide the names of nearly 100 survivors. Intimate photos and sensitive data were public for hours before being removed. Man, that's just too bizarre. The Department of Justice admitted the mistake, but the damage was already done, right? Of course, the question remains, was this incompetence or an attempt to discourage future whistleblowing? Unfortunately, among the files, there were FBI charts showing how Epstein recruited girls by paying them hundreds of dollars to bring in other friends. A pyramid scheme of abuse that lasted for decades. He really knew how that business worked, didn't he? After President Donald Trump's name, the most interesting personalities for the public are Bill Gates and Elon Musk. Both richer than Bruce Wayne, Batman, or Tony Stark, Iron Man, right? Superheroes with superpowers, plus technology funded by their fortunes. That's right, folks, Bill Gates. The documents suggest that Epstein tried to blackmail Gates using knowledge of the billionaire's alleged extramarital affairs with a Russian bridge player. Notes from 2013 indicate that Epstein bragged about helping Gates with medication and facilitating meetings. Of course, the public wants to know if that was all there was and how deep their connection really was, right? Gates has already given interviews talking about this. that he regrets having meetings with Epstein and all that, that his wife also gave him a hard time because of it, right? But it's like I told you, my friend, when the mess splashes, the smell is hard to get rid of. About Elon Musk, old emails from 2012 and 2013 show Musk asking Epstein about when the wildest parties on the island would be. Although Musk claims he never visited the islands, the emails show Epstein offering helicopters to him and his then partner, Tallulah Riley. Epstein's response was, "There will always be room for you." And there's also an uncomfortable past that seems to have caught up with Bill and Hillary Clinton, who continue to be questioned by the House Oversight Committee but refuse to testify about their connections with Epstein. Almost the same situation applies to Donald Trump, who, although he promised the full release of documents, also appears in the flight records from 93 to 96. These records show the current president as a passenger on Epstein's jet at least 8 times. Trump's defense claims that the accusations are false or fabrications sent to the FBI years ago. But the public pressure for everyone, without exception, to explain their presence in this social circle continues. Even Brazilian names like Lula and Bolsonaro appear in peripheral mentions and third-party conversations, showing that Epstein's tentacles sought influence in every corner of the globe. There's even a post made by BP talking about someone who was talking to Epstein. They said that Bolsonaro was stabbed in Brazil and he supposedly said, "Better him than me," something like that. In other words, guys, my God, it's endless. Many people have already lost their lives in this web of perversion, and that's the rot, the foot in hell of this whole story. One of the victims, the lawyer Virginia Giuffre, died on April 24, 2025 in Australia. She was living there. She went from being a victim to an activist against the institutionalized sexual abuse by Epstein and Ghislaine Maxwell. It was her courage and determination that inspired many other victims to come forward, push for the investigation and the conviction of Jeffrey Epstein. One of his partners and associates, the Frenchman Jean-Luc Brunel, also died. The death occurred under suspicious circumstances inside a prison while he was awaiting his trial. According to reports, Epstein traveled to Brazil and kept in contact with people who provided him with prostitutes, including minors. These connections were established through Jean-Luc and his front modeling agency, which was actually involved in recruiting girls and women. It was a human trafficking scheme. Jean-Luc died as a way to cover up evidence, we could say, or he and Jeffrey Epstein have new identities and are living somewhere very paradisiacal, enjoying the money they made. At the same time, they read the articles and laugh at the expense of the lives they destroyed, because there's that too, right? He died back in 2009. There are some photos comparing noses and stuff, but then it gets into that story again, right? All conspiracy theory? I don't know. Do you guys believe it? Telling you something like this, you're going to believe it, aren't you? There has to be a photo, a video then. For the mainstream media, Jeffrey Epstein died in 2019, hanged in his cell with a rope made from clothes. That night, the guards fell asleep and didn't check on the inmate in the cell every half hour as they were supposed to. They forgot that day. That night, the security cameras weren't pointed at the door of the most famous inmate's cell in the institution. That night, 2 minutes are missing from the security video recordings. The autopsy report was later corrected. We know all the details of the post-mortem procedures, but surely it wouldn't be impossible to take him out alive, would it? Guys, it's just like those spy movies, all about control. Man, it's bizarre. Of course, guys, the system he built survived because a lot of powerful people got involved in removing evidence from their houses. So, the public release of these 3 million documents could reveal a lot, or it could just be one last smokescreen to blind us. And so, guys, we can't really talk about the details, the minutiae, because that would be irresponsible, right? After all, that's the job of the justice system, and the justice system can't do it because it's under the control of these living demons on Earth. So, yeah, we're really screwed. But that's how it is. There are also books, several of them, and documentaries about all of this with more legal backing, right? Here we need to be careful, walk on eggshells, because you know how it is. Sometimes the post ends up peeing on the dog all of a sudden. But that was the overall summary of the Epstein case. I hope you enjoyed our work today. If there are any very relevant updates, we'll update the episode for you as well. Deal? Thanks for keeping us company. Don't forget to leave your like, your comment, even if it's just an emoji. A kiss from Ruivo, and see you in the next episode.